You are the guardian of this brand, of these values from the first touch point, so from the job description till when the person leaves. Right. So if the career page, if the job descriptions, if the interviews, if the first day at work is not a reflection of who the organization is as an employer, then the employer brand professional should have a say in that.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
I have you with me again, Vanessa Camenzuli, and you have been in business for about 1.5 years now. You're running your own show.
I am. Crazy shit.
Crazy shit. Yeah. And you do employer branding and communication, like your title is employer branding and communication strategist. What does that mean? What is it that you do?
Yeah. So when I set out alone, Heidi, the one thing I wanted to avoid was getting mixed up in the myriad of, let's say, HR consultants, primarily because core HR is not what I do. I speak the core HR language. I can do that. But really, my career trajectory started in marketing and PR, and slowly started moving more into internal functions. So of course it did end in talent management, but more the side of kind of employee engagement, employee experience, and a lot of HR communications. So I really needed to make sure that it was clear that what I do is not your, let's say, traditional HR consultancy. Plus, it's not where my heart is. Let's put it that way.
I see. So your uncommon title sort of brings in the mix of HR and marketing.
Fantastic. Exactly. I really sit within the middle. I like to tell people that I speak both languages, so I understand what the KPIs of a marketing campaign are. I understand how to write something, but then I also understand what an HR function is made up of, right? And I know how these two, and really when it comes to employer branding, there's this symbiotic relationship between these two areas. So that's kind of how this all came about.
Vanessa, can I pick your brain today on the buzzword that it used to be a buzzword, employer branding? Has it matured? Is there anything specific within gaming that we should know about? I want to talk about challenges and opportunities, and also sort of where to start.
Yeah, it is a buzzword.
And also, you mentioned KPIs, measures. How do I know it's actually working?
Yeah.
You come from game. You've been at Evolution, working with employer branding. What would you say is there anything? Do you know what? Let's roll back. Employer branding, Vanessa. Give us the brief. What is it to you?
So I know that employer branding gets thrown around left, right, and center as a buzzword most of the time. And most of the time it is associated with a lot of external efforts on promoting an organization as a place to work. And that's where things start going a bit wrong, if I may say. Because first of all, let's make a distinction between employer brand and employer branding. So employer brand is the reputation of an organization as an employer, both with potential talent, so potential employees, as well as current employees. Employer branding are your efforts not only to maintain or build that reputation, but even more importantly, to attract, engage, and retain talent. So when someone or when an organization is primarily focusing on the external part, it's like they're doing half the job. So you can't really call that employer branding, truthfully.
And is there anything, I mean, this sounds as a standardized way of describing employer branding throughout all industries. Is there anything that is gaming specific?
I would say in the definition, there's definitely not something gaming specific. I would say potentially in the practice of it and in the implementation of how would we go about building an employer brand and how would we engage in employer branding, that would be a little bit different. So one thing that definitely comes to mind is that we are working in a relatively junior industry. We are not as old as manufacturing, as hospitality. So the brand legacies that we are working with are not the same. So the values we stand for, the differentiation between one, for example, casino to another is not like, let's say, I don't know, Hilton and the Westin, right? So that, what happens with that is that you don't have as much corporate brand to lean onto as much as you would if you were perhaps working in an older industry, an industry where brand and the differentiation of your organization is so necessary. The gaming industry kind of shines in its product brands, right?
I was going to say, the substance is the casino, the brand of the casino, the ones
Exactly.
that you are actually putting on commercial.
Exactly. So in vis-a-vis our efforts to attract talent, then that becomes quite a challenge, right? Because whereas with, I'm going to mention hotels because everyone kind of can think of that. Whereas you may know a hotel as a consumer and as a potential talent, the likelihood of you knowing a casino product as a customer and as potential talent is not as likely, right? Because we would, or for example, we all engage with McDonald's, but we may not all engage with playing casino games.
Exactly. Because it's been around longer, it's more in sort of, it's a word that flows.
Yeah, it's around longer, but it also, it's the, I would say, where the efforts lie, right? We cannot lie about the fact that gaming organizations are not predominantly perhaps putting so much attention on their corporate brand. They're not investing as much in their corporate brand. Who are they? What is their mission? What is their vision? What do they really stand for? They are mostly investing in their product brand because their consumers are coming to them for their product brand and not for their corporate brand.
Question here. Online versus offline. I mean, McDonald's, I'm not the McDonald's regular customer, but obviously I see it every day as I pass it. If I'm not a casino player, I wouldn't pass randomly a casino unless the commercial is up and running around it. So that's another struggle for the online casinos. Now, I want to go back to, you have been one of the largest casino suppliers, live casino producer, Evolution. As an employer brand professional, what is it that an employer branding professional actually do?
Yeah, so In a way, I like to describe an employer branding professional as the guardian of the organization's, let's say, values, right?
All right.
And purpose.
Okay. Yes, tell me.
So the role in practice can be very vast, and maybe we will have time to get into skill sets and not skill sets, but you are the guardian of this brand, of these values from the first touch point, so from the job description till when the person leaves. Right. So if the career page, if the job descriptions, if the interviews, if the first day at work is not a reflection of who the organization is as an employer, then the employer brand professional should have a say in that. Now, what does that mean in practice? It could mean that you look at the social media strategy. It could mean that you write the content for the career site or the content for all the social media activity. It could be that you, for example, this is one of the key projects that I worked on, where I redesigned the whole employee experience of onboarding across Evolution. So we did this, actually we spoke about it at the HR Connect conference, right? So that would be one of the projects. Another project that I did was I came up with the talent acquisition strategy for various of our sites, but not through just with the creative hat. So not just from a point of view of what videos do we create, what posts do we create, but mostly what are the needs of the people that we need to attract. So for example, when I was working on our Canada studio, we found out that actually something that attracts the team of game presenters, online casino dealers to the role is that the office is really nice. The job is a cleaner job than if they were working at an entry-level role in, I don't know, Starbucks or any other company. So these nuances you will not discover if you're just wearing your kind of creative hat, right? So this is where kind of my business psychology comes in. And as an employer branding professional, this is where your remit is so vast. Now, of course, it could be that different employer branding roles have different areas of focus. For some, it could be purely internal communications, right? Or for some, it could be purely social media.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Not all the companies are amazing places to work for, right? And I would say that gaming companies most often have the prerequisites needed to create a very nice place to work. As you were saying, the office. Quite often do the gaming companies that we visit, they're quite nice. There, there is extra greenery, there's breakfast, lunch, whatever served to satisfy the employees. There might still be a horrible culture or a non-culture or a wrong culture to someone. Hiring an employer branding person, it's like the hen and the egg. What comes first? Hiring an employer branding person to push out this is our brand, a brand I could fake going around in clothes that aren't me, and people would perceive me as, that's Heidi, but it's not Heidi. What I mean is, what happens if you employ an employer branding person that does a job portraying a company that doesn't really exist? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Basically, that is a red flag, right? And
the question is really, to be honest,
yeah.
If this is a hen and egg question, if a company is at the rock bottom of culture or has a very high turnover, for instance, how can employer branding help? Maybe that's the right question to ask.
Yeah. So let me see how to phrase this.
Because you would...
In my model of employer branding, I talk about 3 key ingredients. And the number, I wouldn't say number one, but let's say they're equally all important. But one of them is leadership behaviors and leadership culture. So having an employer branding professional in your organization who has no link to leadership or link to the team that deals with leadership is not going to support the development of an employer brand, because your employer brand is essentially your culture, right? It's your values. That's what makes a culture. That's what makes an employer brand. Now, if you reach the point where what you're saying out there is not a reflection of what you have in there, you have suddenly lost the trust, not only of the people out there and the people who just came in, but you have your whole workforce, which you have lost the trust of. So this is something that I speak a lot about because there is a big business risk around this. There is a massive business risk of portraying something that is not there. Now, we know that companies are not perfect, just like every family. Every company is also dysfunctional. We know this. Yet, every company, every dysfunctional company also has strengths. So the role of the employer branding professional is to understand what those strengths are and portray those strengths, right, into the external world. But when it comes to interviews, it is a different story. So I wouldn't say a funny story, but a story that I say a lot. One of my team members that I hired at Evolution was a very British lady. Well, she was a few years older than I was. And when she came for the interview, I was so direct with her about what she's going to get from being there, but also what I am in zero position to promise her, right? So this was not a 9-to-5 job. This was not a job that I could give goals over a period of a year, because things change on a daily basis. So clarity, okay, was something I could not commit to, etc., etc., etc. And through the time that we worked together, when the going got really tough, she was very British and blunt. And she always used to tell me, Van, I can't tell you anything because you were so clear in the interview, right? But she still took the job. And she...
Probably because of that.
Yeah, because I clearly explained what this organization can give her, but what this organization will not give her. Right?
So that's you acting out of own sort of smartness, business smartness, I would say. Now, and I'm going back to leaders. You and I know that leaders, C-level, might not always buy into the fluffy area of this, right? So as an employer branding professional, how would you sell this? Or how would you show that your employer branding efforts are actually working? How do you measure this? What are there KPIs to be used?
Yeah, let's start with your first question rather than the KPI side of things. So talent nowadays has become the reason why organizations are not growing or not performing as well as they can because of poor performance.
Poor performance.
Right? What do I mean by poor performance? Basically, people are just doing the minimum, right?
In large teams, I would say. Like anyways, this is another discussion. Sorry, go.
Yeah, let's focus on from an organizational point of view at this point. Okay, so number one, organizations are struggling to find people. And when they don't find people, this could mean that they stop growing. Number two, the people they have are not being maximized. There's irrelevant of team size, the general statistics show that people are disengaged across. So this is a business risk if nothing is done about this. This is fact. This is not fluff. Now, does it mean that the only intervention is employer branding? No. But thinking about your reputation as an employer and building an internal culture that can be differentiated is an option. So it is a way of mitigating these two other risks, so your performance and your growth. So seeing it in that light, it's not fluff, it's logic. I'm seeing you nod.
Yes. No, but if you still want to prove it, you want to show on a piece of paper that this is actually working. Look, thanks to our efforts, we've been hiring skilled people in this area. It's not the amount of people that you hire. Like, it's not the easiest, Vanessa, I would say.
It's not the easiest, but when you understand how much your cost per hire is, then yeah, it becomes easier. Because if you are over a period of time seeing that your length of service is going up, then that means you're spending less on your recruitment, right? Then it works. But employer branding is not a project. Employer branding is an approach to your talent management. And this is where things get really messy. Because when it is understood as a project, then of course there's no KPIs and there's no ROI.
No, exactly. We were talking about this just before we actually went on to this call. How do you measure creativity? I told you about my morning as like no output whatsoever, but I've been so productive.
Yeah. Basically, an organization that wants to use employer branding as a way to attract, engage, and retain talent is an organization that believes that by differentiating themselves, they're going to have a competitive advantage. It is an organization that also believes that if you create a sense of brand of who you are and you are communicating this internally, you are increasing performance. Why? Because people feel like they belong to something. Employer branding is not the chefs, the trips to Sicily, the extravagant parties. That is not employer branding because that is not differentiating you and it's not giving people a sense of belonging to something they really believe in.
So if a company feels, listening into this now, feels like we're none of that, where do they start?
They need to start on understanding their strengths, on why people are there. They need to start in understanding where they want to go. So what is their vision for their company? And they need to understand what the needs of their employees are and what the HR trends are. Once they have all this data, then they can start articulating who they are as an employer, even if they don't have an official mission, vision, and values.
I was going to say, we talk about it has to start from the top and drizzle down. Do you agree to this? Or can culture start from the organization, from within the organization? Isn't it already there in some way?
A culture is already there to some extent, but it can be curated. And what I see in the industry is that culture is not being curated. Culture is being left as a non-asset. And initially, at least, it was very much defined by materialistic initiatives and activities.
Yes,
Like the very nice office.
exactly.
But the very nice office alone does not meet all the needs of an employee to make them thrive and to make them go the extra mile. Right? So this is what is happening. Of course, there is culture organically, but the organic is of no use to you as a business owner, as a business leader.
If we go back to sort of, identify that this, now we're talking about gaming again. Challenges and opportunities. Challenges is, one of the challenges, as I take it now from what you're telling us, is the heritage of the nice offices, the expectations of the materialistic givings to the employees. Or am I wrong?
Yeah. Yes, I would say a challenge is that the kind of sense of culture has been built around a lot of the materialistic things, which has led gaming companies to not differentiate themselves, which goes exactly against what you want to do with your employer brand, right? You want to be known for something. So that's one challenge. Another challenge that we already mentioned is that the brand legacy is not really there to build on. So we don't have brands that people know. And there is not so much investment in the corporate brand. So, and then when you're building an employer brand, it's kind of you really need to focus on your employer brand, right? Because you have no other perception. The potential talent or the current talent has no other reference point of who you are. The third challenge is that leadership is relatively junior and it is industry built, right? So again, because our organizations aren't so old, right? So we don't have people coming in maybe all the time from different industries. There's no reference point to those seasoned leadership skills that actually are a leadership culture, right? So again, I'm mentioning the hospitality industry. If you speak to a leader that worked in the Hilton, right? The leaders within the Hilton have this sense of, this is what makes me a Hilton leader, right? So this goes beyond my leadership skills. It's more about what my leadership values and behaviors are. So let's say the lack of seasoned leadership is also a challenge to build a successful employer brand, I would say. And again, this is not a challenge just in the industry, but employer branding skill set is so vast that is also a challenge, right? So you need someone that understands organizational culture and can coach leaders, and then you need someone who can create a crazy, amazing video. And this is just such a massive skill set. But then there are definitely opportunities, I find, in the industry, and definitely compared to other industries, especially if we're talking about in comparison, let's say, to the Malta base, where we know a lot of gaming industry companies are based, is that there is an understanding of investing in employees more. So there is more room for budget, which is great. And there are also more HR resources if we had to compare. So I, at the moment, don't only work for gaming clients, but I also work for actually quite large local organizations. But the size of the HR teams are like no comparison, right? So that's also a massive opportunity. And I really feel that there's an opportunity to use who the organization is, the employer brand, to increase performance and to increase that sense of belonging. I really feel that. It pains me that although we've moved away from maybe the chefs and all of that, we are still heavily focusing on employer branding as a very, very superficial project versus a tool that's going to take the organization's performance and elevate the organization to take it to the next level. Right? Because employer branding has a pivotal role in performance. Why? Because we're saying, we're not only telling you, Heidi, we expect you to achieve these KPIs, we're also telling you, we expect you to behave like this because these are our values. So then, if we are colleagues, I know that you value integrity as much as I do because we are being held accountable to our integrity.
I'm thinking like in the beginning you said like any family, you compared an organization to a family, employer brand, culture. And I go, where is my own family in that sense? I think that the trust, the sense of belonging too, and perform. You can't perform all the time. But
yes, but just to challenge you on this, it's not about performing all the time. It's about, and I just want to clarify here, I would never look at a company like a family, but more like a community.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I only use the family analogy for when it's about it being dysfunctional. But I would compare an organization to a community where we share our purpose and our values. And when a person in a community is operating out of line, or when they are no longer able to have that sense of community and have those common values, they opt to move out of that community, or they are asked. And this is what maintains high performance. Right? Because if we can't share the same expectations, then that's when we start checking out. And that is what is happening.
And when people tell different stories about the same organization, for instance.
Yeah, or when people are not accountable because nothing is holding them accountable to their behaviors.
Organizations that wants to start looking into their own employer branding, do they best start identifying their own culture and strengths by themselves, or do they go with you? And how do people find you? How do organizations find you and start working with you, Vanessa? Because this is what you do these days.
Yes.
Quite successfully, I would say.
Yes. So, of course, an organization could do this exercise internally. However, you're never going to be as objective. Like when you are doing that research, when you are identifying the strengths, when you are identifying maybe those blind spots, doing it internally is going to give you a limited, I would say, understanding. Yes, right? So yes, of course, opting for someone external, like myself, could support at least that initial definition, right? On your question of how I can be found, so I do have a website, which is vanessacamenzuli.com, and I am on LinkedIn, which I'm quite active on. So even if anyone is just interested in understanding a little bit more about employer branding, feel free to follow me.
There's quite a lot of material as well, you speaking on my stage of the HR Connect track during the summer as well at the next Valletta conference. So we will definitely see more of you in the future as well. Anything else before we conclude?
Anything else? So if we were speaking to two audiences here, perhaps I would tell the HR and the marketing audience to work very closely with their leaders, challenge them on what they want to be known as an employer, and articulate what the business risk of not working on this could entail. So move away from small talk about people complaining because they need to come into the office. So move the conversation upwards. And to the audience of CEOs and senior leaders, I would tell them to really reflect on how they could use who they are as an employer as a competitive advantage by moving towards really differentiating themselves versus doing the same thing that everyone else does.
Very good. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you for having me, Heidi.